Welcome to the Double Blind Magic Hour, where we cover what's going on in the world of psychedelics, from insider baseball drama within the rapidly unfolding psychedelic movement to the latest news on research, politics, and beyond. We're here to talk with the most brilliant minds we know from the psychedelic frontier about the popularization of shrooms, acid, DMT, you name it. Today, we are joined by a regular contributor to the magazine, Mattha Busby. He's also the author of the book, Should All Drugs Be Legalized? A Primer for the 21st Century, as well as a contributor to The Guardian, Vice, and many others. Hey, Mattha.
Hey, Shelby. Thanks very much for having me on this exciting new podcast.
We're stoked to have Fungi as the official sponsor of the Double Blind Magic Hour. Fungi makes psychedelic alternative chocolates and fruit chews activated with kanna. And if you haven't heard of or explored kanna yet, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful plant from South Africa that is growing in popularity. It is completely legal, and it's a very heart-opening experience. Some people use it as an alternative to alcohol. People also use it in meditation. There's a lot of uses for kanna. One of the amazing things about fungi is that they not only include kanna, but they also include other ingredients that are intended for sort of gentle stimulation. They're intended for having a good time. They can also be used as aphrodisiacs. They include a combination of kanna and also functional mushrooms in their products. And from my personal experience, I really enjoyed taking these. I had a friend over the other day. We took some fungi chocolates. We did some yoga in my backyard. And it was just like that gentle opening and relaxation that we were wanting as we wrapped our days. So whether you're going to a festival, whether you are going on a mushroom trip, or you're just looking to have a good time with yourself at home in your backyard, I recommend checking out Fungi. Podcast listeners can get 25% off their first order. Just use code DoubleBlindPod at fungi, FUNGUY.com. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Psyched Wellness. Psyched Wellness is on a mission to bring you the healing, restorative magic of Amanita muscaria mushrooms with their product, Calm. Calm is a unique, legal Amanita muscaria extract available for sale in the United States. It's been formulated by wellness professionals to help you rest, relax, and keep stress at bay, all without the high. You can get some Calm in your life now and save 10% with the code DOUBLEBLIND at psyched-wellness.com. That's PSYCHED-wellness.com. So what are you waiting for? Drift into dreamland with Calm. Your mind and body will thank you. And thank you so much for all of the contributions that you have made to Double Blind. I can't remember exactly when we connected, but you pretty quickly became a very regular contributor to Double Blind, and it's because you are one of these people that I think can kind of write about anything. You can do quick hits on breaking news, you can do longer form magazine style features, you can do profiles, you've done it all, and you do it all for Double Blind, and we really appreciate having you as a part of the team.
Well, thanks so much. I think I was pretty much looking for folks to run like serializations, like a short bit from my book a couple of years ago. And I'd just written this piece for The Intercept about, something to do with Biden and Biden's cabinet and psychedelics. So you guys very kindly put a extract of my book in your magazine, and we're like, why don't you start writing some articles for us? And kind of went from there. So yeah, really, really great to be on board.
It's really worked out. And I think one of the things that is most interesting about you is that you do write about psychedelics and drug policy, but you also write about a lot of other things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was originally a news reporter at The Guardian in London, going to court cases, going to protests, or writing just random things about the weather. So I guess I have that kind of
a lot of
routing.
Times, right? It's like, we all sort of began there those of us who sort of walked the traditional newsroom trajectory, right? It's like one day you're covering a gay pride parade. The next day you're covering the fact that Uber might automate its vehicles. The next day you're interviewing an artist. And it's really fun. And then at some point you choose a beat, or a lot of folks do, right? Do you consider psychedelics and drugs your beat?
I would say so, yeah. Drug policy, or in fact health policy, because I've written quite a bit on food and wider policy. And yeah, to dial in and really kind of find one's niche is, yeah, a great thing. And yeah, recently I've been writing for more wide collection of publications because I haven't been working so much at The Guardian anymore. And yeah, it seems like it's, yeah, on an upward trajectory. And yeah, really, really great to be here, kind of just, yeah, expanding my expertise and getting my head around some of these more mind-bending things that are going on.
So how did you, it's always really interesting to me how people stumble into writing about psychedelics. I think one of the things that's most interesting about it is that a lot of reporters, I mean, more and more we're seeing journalists and editors at places like Business Insider and Forbes and stuff who have never done a psychedelic, who are writing about psychedelics, which is a whole other conversation. But for those of us who have been doing it for, you know, at least 3, 4, 5 years, most of us kind of fell into it because we were doing psychedelics and in our day jobs, we were journalists. And at some point the trajectories merged. Is that your story, or how did you fall into it?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, back in 2015, I was living in Montreal and I was working for the student newspaper at the university. And around that time, I began having experiences with psychedelics. And yeah, it was just a sort of coincidence, really. I was like, wow, this is actually kind of interesting and no one's talking about it. So yeah, it went from there. I mean, I advise people not to check out my stories for Vice from 2015, but yeah.
Right. Don't check out my stories from the beginning of my career either. I'm like, Google's burying all these stories that Double Blind is publishing that we don't want them to bury, but they still got to keep my byline from when I first became a journalist at the very top of the page.
Yeah. I've asked actually for one article to get taken down, but they said they couldn't do it, but I could write in a letter and then they would publish the letter and then affix the letter to the bottom of the story. But then I figured that could just, attract more attention to the story, frankly.
It can be forgiven. It's a crazy thing when you're first learning to report and you really do just kind of get thrown into the belly of the beast. I mean, I remember when I first became a journalist, I was working at CBS News, and literally my editor was like, here's a recorder, go to the White House and start interviewing people. There were protests outside the White House, and I was like, okay. So that's kind of how it goes. But
having that baptism of fire, I think, in the, you know, for like established media companies does hold one in good stead, I think. Because there was so many occasions when similar things happened to me. So now actually it's amazing, really, to be writing about such interesting things without there being like too much jeopardy or even like crazy ass like, you know, deadlines. It's a bit of a blessing, really.
So maybe this is kind of a silly question, but why are psychedelics interesting to you as a beat?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm seeing how from the ground up, psychedelic use, psychedelia is transforming society in subtle ways, but also in like quite revolutionary ways, I feel too. And states are responding by dialing down their drug wars in various different ways. So we're not having the same kind of confrontation as there was, you know, previously in the 70s. But then, on a personal level, some of the most interesting and transformative and powerful and scary experiences of my life have been under the influence of psychedelics. I've been to the Amazon and drunk ayahuasca. I've been in the Mexican desert hunting peyote. And these experiences obviously leave quite an impression on you. And to then kind of look into what the issues are. Like, I've written about people being arrested for facilitating ayahuasca ceremonies in Romania, in various places, and looked into the issues facing the Wawarika people that are the custodians of the peyote medicine. So yeah, these things are like quite close to my heart, actually, because they've really helped me grow as a person, and explore different states of consciousness and really open my heart as well.
Wow, you have been so many incredible places. You have met so many incredible people. How do you end up all these places that you end up? And how do you find stories along the way?
I think it's just a sort of intrepid kind of curiosity. But I was living in Mexico during the pandemic for 2 years. So yeah, when one is living in Oaxaca, and I got tapped in with folks who are putting on peyote circles and all of that, and things just lead in certain directions, really. But yeah, it's been super incredible, being able to in these places, in the home of magic mushrooms, Huautla de Jimenez, meeting the family of Maria Sabina. Like, I cried, actually. It was really made quite an impression on me, being in, right next to the house where she put on the ceremony for Gordon Wasson, and speaking to her like great nephew about her legacy and her grandson. And they're such humble people, and I don't think they entirely grasp, actually, the historical significance of Maria Sabina telling Gordon Wasson, and then suddenly the West, whether the knowledge was forgotten or whether we never knew or never had appreciated the psychedelic healing powers of magic mushrooms, seems unlikely, but possible. I don't think they quite comprehend it, but who am I to say? But I tried to get the significance across anyway, and that was incredible to be able to visit Huautla. It was only like, I think it was about 10 hours away from where I was living on the coast of Oaxaca. So I drove my motorbike to Oaxaca City, which was like 6 hours, and then met some folks, and we drove like another 4 hours. So it can happen.
And for folks who don't know, can you just give like a brief little summary of the significance of Sabina? You mentioned Gordon Wasson. Folks who are in the psychedelic industry and movement certainly know this story, but I think there's probably a lot of people even to this day who are interested in psychedelics, who have had their lives changed by mushrooms, who have never heard of Sabina, because I hadn't when I was 18 years old and decided to trip on shrooms for the first time in my college dorm.
Yeah, me neither. I was at a dubstep rave, and I met someone, and she just pulled out a bag of magic mushrooms from her bra. So I ate some there.
I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah, it wasn't the best setting in hindsight, but one learns with these experiences. But basically, I mean, so I think we're talking like mid 1950s here. You've got Gordon Wasson, who's a JP Morgan executive, and his interest in mushrooms mycology was spawned from like him and his wife, when they're on their honeymoon, they came across some mushrooms, and he was like
Valentina,
disgusted.
She's not given enough credit, so we have to give her a shout out.
She's much more than his mere wife. Valentina, forgive me. And she was like, he was repulsed. She was super interested, and then that kind of spawned like why is that? She's Russian. So then they dived into amateur mycology, and long story short, I've heard about psychedelic mushroom use, although the word wasn't necessarily in usage by then. I wasn't sure when Humphrey Osmond invented it, but some kind of mind-altering mushrooms in a distant part of Mexico. So they went down there.
A faraway land.
Yeah.
The exotification of anything outside of the global north in a faraway land.
There's obviously like big issues about the whole like Oriental kind of framing of it in as like
I know,
in the Life.
I know.
They published this article in Life, and it went viral for the Times. And I don't think he'd necessarily got the requisite permissions from Maria Sabina, and certainly I don't think she'd consented to him basically revealing the location of this village at the time that then got swamped with loads of like mezcal swigging kind of wannabe hippies that just wanted to get out of their heads. But I mean, some amazing things must have happened there as well. I think like the Beatles are rumored to have visited, and yeah, today Woutler, yeah, it depends on the tourism really from the magic mushroom pilgrims going there. It's quite a sight really. Like there's dozens, if not 100 or so people there on any given day walking up the mountain behind Maria Sabina's house. Like, and many of them are wearing like Maria Sabina shirts that kind of invoke mushroom iconography. But then some people also literally holding like crucifixes over their shoulders. So it's this interesting like blend of this indigenous Mazatec mushroom religion belief system and Christianity. But yeah,
so
it's
just
tricky.
To be clear for folks who are listening, Gordon Wasson ended up sitting in a magic mushroom ceremony with a curandera by the name of Maria Sabina, who is now often sort of credited in the Western imagination as being the mother of magic mushrooms, because, people weren't really taking magic mushrooms at that time. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the mushrooms that Sabina gave Wasson ended up making it into the hands of Albert Hofmann, the inventor of LSD, the chemist, and that from there, Hofmann was the first one to synthesize psilocybin, the primary psychoactive ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms. So there's a direct tie between what happened in Huautla de Jimenez and sort of really where we are now, which is some might argue the commodification, the corporatization of psilocybin as a synthetic compound that is being given to people in therapeutic contexts for indications like depression, substance dependence, etc. So, this gets into a lot of the ethical conversations around, is it okay to kind of take medicines out of their, quote, biocultural frameworks and, send them through the drug development process. People often think about what's happening at Yale, NYU, Johns Hopkins, Imperial College London, all these universities that are investigating synthetic psychedelics as separate from their sort of ancestral origins. But they're not. I mean, especially in the case of psilocybin, there's a direct tie. Yeah,
there's serious questions for the big players in the psychedelic industry over reciprocity and what they can do to, help the communities that have basically discovered and protected this knowledge, often in the face of potential violence from colonizers and the state and witch hunters. So it's not for me to necessarily sort of write up a plan on the back of a fag packet now, but it seems to me that there's not nearly enough being done by a lot of these companies that stand to make rather big profits.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about all of this in the rest of the podcast, all these threads of the ancestral origins of these medicines, what's happening around the commodification and corporatization of them, because really all of these threads are interwoven through so many of the stories that you have told for us, whether we're talking about a shroom dispensary, whether we're talking about, the synthesis of a, quote, novel psychedelic compound. It all kind of comes back to the same themes, the same narratives again and again. And there's so much for us to get into, but first we're going to take a quick break. Did you know that there is one phase of sleep that almost everyone fails to get enough of? And this one phase of sleep is responsible for most of your body's daily rejuvenation, repair, controlling hunger and weight loss hormones, boosting energy, and so much more? I'm talking about deep sleep. And if you don't get enough, you'll probably struggle with cravings, slow metabolism, premature aging, or even worse conditions. Why don't most people get enough of this one most important phase of sleep? A big reason is magnesium deficiency, because over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium. And magnesium increases GABA, which encourages relaxation on a cellular level, which is critical for sleep. Magnesium also plays a key role in regulating your body's stress response system. Those with magnesium deficiency usually have higher stress levels, which negatively impacts sleep as well. Now, before you go out and buy a magnesium supplement, it's important to understand that most products out there only have 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, when the reality is your body needs all 7 forms of this essential sleep mineral. That's what makes Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers unique. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. For an exclusive offer, go to bioptimizers.com/doubleblind and use promo code DOUBLEBLIND during checkout to save 10%. So for those of you who don't know, Double Blind began as a print magazine, and it's still at the heart of what we do. I spent my whole career as a journalist before starting Double Blind, reporting on psychedelics, cannabis, and drug policy more broadly for Rolling Stone, Vice, LA Weekly, Quartz. I did just about everything in journalism. I worked at CBS News covering breaking news, a major newspaper, small media startups, and if you haven't heard, journalism is in crisis. But we started Double Blind anyway because we believe in the value of good journalism to educate and hold stakeholders accountable. We saw what happened in cannabis. Pioneers who put their lives on the line to get patients access to the medicine they needed, getting left behind because they didn't have the capital to compete in the newly regulated market. We've seen what's happened in mental health care and healthcare more broadly, whereby millions of people are suffering, don't trust their doctors, can't afford proper care, and just don't know what to do to get well. In our print magazine, we feature essays, investigations, photojournalism, and much more by world-class journalists who are going everywhere from the ayahuasca tourism industry in Peru to laboratories at leading universities. We're supporting people like you on their journey with psychedelics, and we're covering this movement as it unfolds. This is all made possible by our members who, in exchange for their support, get direct access to psychedelic experts to help them on their journeys of healing and growth, workshops, and a subscription to our beautiful print magazine. Subscribe today at doubleblindmag.com/membership. Okay, so we're back, and we are going to get into some of the stories that you have reported for Double Blind, including a really interesting story about a group of veterans going by the Church of Silomethoxin in Austin, Texas. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more about your experiences in Huautla. Hopefully at some point you will write a story about this. I have been wanting us to publish a story at Double Blind on what is happening around sort of the tourism industry in Huautla for a long time, since Double Blind started.
It's really, honestly, I mean, we were there in June, so just at the beginning of the rainy season in Mexico, and it was honestly like being in the heavens, because the clouds like intersperse with the town and the houses. Is really quite a magical place. But yeah, many people, you over here in the town are speaking the Mazatec language, not Spanish. And yeah, nearby, there's lots of fields where one can find magic mushrooms. And yeah, we met like a local guide, and yeah, they paid a tribute to a local community, and yeah, we were able to go looking for them. I think the ones we found were called Hambe, the name of the strain. And
do you know, were they Psilocybe cubensis?
I'm not sure. No. And yeah, there's a whole, like, I guess, industry for like magic mushroom ceremonies, and as I'm saying, yeah, to forage as well. And yeah, there's like questions over like how legit some of the curanderos and curanderas are today. Certainly there's no malicious intent. Yeah. But yeah, certainly in our experience, we were maybe certain things were left to be desired during our ceremony. And yeah, I've subsequently heard, yes, similar such stories. And now people are also, Westerners are putting on like retreats in Woutler, so people can go there and kind of really have like a sort of, authentic experience where like, Westerners will support a like Mazatec medicine person and bring like 20 people from outside that wouldn't otherwise have been coming to Woutler for that sort of experience. So there's definitely like, there's a lot going on there. You can tell just like random, just like German men just like walking along the street, or suddenly you hear people speaking in Russian. It's a super trippy place.
So it's really interesting because what has happened in Huautla has also now happened in so many other parts of the world. Kind of the psychedelic hotspots that come to mind for me that have indigenous communities in and around them that have used plant medicines for a long time and now have become sort of seeds of a blossoming psychedelic retreat center industry are Pucallpa, Iquitos, Gabon, but Huautla was really kind of the first. And in all of these places, we see a lot of the same sort of problems, really, which is you have the healers, the curanderas and the curanderos, who have, many of whom were sort of chosen by their communities to walk this path, who sometimes come from, families and lineages that passed this down to them. And then you have people in the community who sort of see an opportunity to take advantage of the growing number of foreigners that are interested in participating in psychedelics. And they probably fall along a wide spectrum of integrity and levels of training. We have people that really don't know what they're doing. And then we also have people that perhaps do, but chose to walk the path because they saw that there was an economic opportunity there, including, and some could argue this is a good thing, a lot of younger people in these communities who, maybe 10, 15 years ago, they were going to the cities because they didn't see any opportunity in their communities. And now they want to stay and they want to learn these traditional ways because there are foreigners who are coming who are interested in participating. And then, of course, you have all of the foreigners and expats that decide to move to these places, again, working on sort of a wide range of integrity and skill levels. And it's sort of crazy. I mean, I know you've been to these places more than I have, but I mean, it's like, there are, to me, it seems like for the most part, the people that you want to sit with, the people you want to do ceremony with are not going to be the people that have made, magic mushroom and ayahuasca flyers and stuck them in the cafes where they know that the expat is going to come for Wi-Fi. Like, that's not the person you want to sit in ceremony with.
Yeah, exactly. There was actually, I heard the premier curandero in Woutler. I shan't reveal the directions, but I heard along the grapevine that she was the one to go to. But my companions had heard about someone else through some kind of recommendation, and then it later turned out that we perhaps should have just been a bit more patient and gone to the less tourist friendly option, because these guys had a whole kind of lodge-ish set up for us to stay as well, and they were lovely and perfectly hospitable and really, really kind folks. But it did seem like the lady that served us the mushrooms that we'd picked that day in a ceremony, had just sort of decided on a whim at some point in their life that they were a medicine woman. But yeah, we didn't really have any indication of that. Like she had like some like leaves. I can't remember the name of it, but she didn't like sing any Icaros, and she was going on her phone and stuff. And yeah, she was a lovely lady, but yeah, it seemed, yeah, left certain things to be desired, and just seemed a little bit like slapdash.
I mean, yeah, you hear everything from stories of people who just wish they had a little more, wish they were a little more supported, don't feel like they were with someone who is as skillful as possible, to just nightmarish stories of, I mean, of course, there's the cases of people being sexually assaulted and stuff like that, which is just awful, awful, awful. But you also hear, a lot of stories of, you show up and you're just kind of stuck in some kind of room, or sometimes they even take you into kind of remote areas. They give you the medicine, they leave you there. They come back 5 hours later. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. So for folks who are listening, we're going to get into this a little bit later in our trip tips section. But, patience. Patience is really kind of the name of the game when it comes to looking for a facilitator, especially when you're in a foreign country. I mean, so many people that just, you hear stories of people who are like, they didn't even go to the Amazon to do ayahuasca. Like they went to see the wildlife, and then they just decide on a whim because they meet some guy. Oh, this sounds like a fun thing to try. I mean, that actually happens all of the time.
That happened to me. I was traveling Peru with an ex-girlfriend, and we were in Lima. To be fair, we weren't already in Iquitos, the jungle, but we were in Lima, and she just goes to me, "Do you want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah." When a beautiful woman asks you, "Do you want to do something?" It's wise to usually respond in the affirmative. And then a couple of hours later, I was like, "Wait, what were you talking about earlier?" I was 21 at the time, and she was like, "Ayahuasca." I was like, "Oh, okay."
a lot of foreigners who serve ayahuasca go to get the ayahuasca vine and also the chacruna leaf. So if you sit with a lot of facilitators in the Iquitos area, many of them, if they're from the region, will tell you, oh, yeah, I went into the jungle myself. I, got this, harvested this ayahuasca vine. And actually, a lot of them are just going to this like shop where basically, it's just a sort of empty store with a counter. And you go in and I walked into the place. I mean, they have giant buckets of vine and chacruna leaf, and you just could buy bags of the stuff and walk out with it. And then, this couple, they have an apartment that they rent, and they go back to the apartment and they make the ayahuasca. Usually folks who are traveling with it, they dehydrate it and then they add water again when they get back to their destination. But it really kind of demystifies the whole thing, right? Like it feels like this sort of mysterious process. Like, where do you get the vine and where do you get the leaf and how do you make the brew? And then you go to it's like anybody can walk into this shop, buy the vine, buy the leaf, walk out with it, brew it in their apartment, and take and fly home with it.
Yeah, this dude in our hostel was from Miami, and he'd come. I think he was dealing with some kind of, I can't exactly remember, some kind of mental health or addiction issue, and he just brewed it up in the hostel and just drank it by himself in the hostel. And yeah, I think you need to be pretty careful with this stuff. Like, who knows? Like, and I do think that, yeah, imbibing these medicines is a kind of portal to the spirit world, and one kind of has to understand how that works, really. And yeah, that's what, having an experienced shaman is there to do, basically, to kind of be that kind of medium between our world and their world, and keep us safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is actually a great moment to transition to talking about the Church of Psilomethoxin, because we're talking about all the different ways that people can have psychedelic experiences right now, all the different settings, all the different people that are facilitating and making psychedelics available. And I mean, it really, really runs the gamut, but there are a growing number of groups, including the Church of Psilomethoxin, which we'll tell you all about what that is in a moment, who in the United States and beyond, who are claiming that they're using psychedelics as a sacrament for religious reasons. Now, I think I've said this in the past, but I'll just say again for folks who are listening, that if someone tells you in the United States, I am a legal church that is serving psychedelics legally, unless they are the Native American church serving peyote or the União de Vegetal serving ayahuasca, that is not true. A lot of groups are saying that they're protected by the First Amendment because, freedom of religion, and they say, oh, well, I'm using this thing with religious intent, so therefore I am protected. But actually, there are only two groups that have been officially given sort of the go-ahead by the federal government to be serving psychedelics for religious reasons. So anyway, the Church of Psilomethoxin, super, super interesting story that you brought to us. You first reported something on this for us last year, and now you're working on a follow-up piece for us, which I think is going to be published before we put this podcast out. But basically, in November of 2021, a combat veteran by the name of Ian Benoit, among others, established this church. And for those of you who are listening and not watching this on YouTube, I'm going to put church in quotes, to make a little herd of psychedelic called psilomethoxin more widely available, actually available at all, because it really hasn't been available, as far as we know, in the underground. It was a compound that was first discovered by chemists in Paris in 1965. And as far as we know, it hasn't really been available since. And people, at least the folks associated with this church, describe it a lot like a 5-MeO DMT experience, which some people describe as the most powerful psychedelic in the world. Now, I'm going to let you speak to that in a moment, Mattha, because I know you think that that isn't quite an accurate description of it. But essentially, what the people at the church are saying is it doesn't typically give you crazy visuals, but it can very quickly sort of disintegrate your sense of reality and even your sense of self. So tell us more. What is going on?
I first got wind of these guys like at the beginning of last year. And I was living in Mexico City at the time, and they were basically organizing their first like in-person church get-together in Austin. So yeah, I went up there for the event. They called it Entheogenesis. And
because of course they did.
Yeah. And coincidentally, like 2 days before, the USONA Institute put out a preprint paper, which, citing a test of an anonymous sample of the so-called sacrament, said they only included trace amounts of psilocybin and psilocin. And so it just, it struck many of the people in the church that, this paper was just talking nonsense, really, because many of the members are experienced psychonauts. And, they can tell the difference, I suppose, between the nature of different psychedelic experiences. And they were saying that, when one eats this, usually it's in like a powder capsule form or in like a chocolate, that there's more of a like transcendent feeling, less of the kind of activation of mushrooms, like that kind of coffee feeling, and more of that open heart DMT-like experience, which Ian had been trying to find a way to create, like orally, to have a kind of microdose 5-MeO, which, I mean, now people are kind of creating vapes that can give a similar experience, but it's not as long lasting. So the thing with...
You've done psilomethoxin, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean to interrupt you. So you tried it?
Yeah, I tried it. I mean, obviously some people will be like, maybe that compromises my objectivity, but for me, I suppose, as a journalist investigating this, if people are saying that it's not what they say it is, or that it's X, Y, or Z, I actually think it's become, what's the word, incumbent upon me to actually try and figure it out myself. I know Tom Wolfe never only did acid like once, and there's questions over whether Hunter S. Thompson's drug use really helped him kind of identify different things correctly. But I tried it, and it's clearly a distinct feeling. It's like no other psychedelic I've tried.
Mm-hmm. Did you have visuals?
Not really. I mean, I've taken like a pretty big. I've took about 4 grams in like chocolate once, and there wasn't that kind of like breakthrough that you can have with mushrooms. It was much more just relaxed feeling mixed with ketamine. I've had some pretty intense visuals, just with the eyes closed. But I think maybe that's its own kind of sacred synthesis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Psilomethoxin and ketamine. You've really gone there. All the combinations. But tell us a little bit more about. So I know Ian is a combat veteran, and I know that he and some of the other veterans that are involved in the church say that they have suffered pretty intense psychological distress as a result of their time overseas. And so, some people kind of roll their eyes at, entheogenesis, and, I think it sounded like their services are more like a Burning Man party than a traditional church service. But it seems like they really believe in what they're doing, and they're kind of trying to find a way around the Controlled Substances Act by synthesizing a novel psychedelic that, people haven't really heard of. So that's why the DEA has yet to put it into Schedule 1, although we can talk in a moment about, this federal law that sort of prohibits people from synthesizing compounds that are very similar to the ones that are federally illegal. They do that on purpose to prevent smart chemists from finding a way around the law. But it seems like they really, they're trying to kind of find a solution to this problem of people are suffering, especially veterans. Psychedelics are illegal.
Everyone has a role, I suppose, in this moment in the psychedelic renaissance. And these guys are kind of more sort of disruptors, outliers, radicals. I mean, they've got 1,500 members in this church, and they've been sending it all across the US and even abroad, like as far afield as Japan.
They're mailing the
silomethoxin. Yeah, they've been mailing it in like chocolate bars.
Yeah, so what they're doing is illegal.
I mean, possibly. I mean, some tests haven't actually detected any psilocybin or psilocin. And now folks are kind of saying, the same folks that were dismissing this sacrament before are now being like, actually, maybe it's like oxidized 5-MeO DMT, which strikes me as like pretty obvious if they've always said that they were feeding, psilocybin mushrooms with 5-MeO like substrate while they're growing. So yeah, it's tricky, really. I mean, they've got the church protection. They don't have a specific exemption, as you kind of noted. No one apart from the churches.
Oh, they are officially a church. They went through the process of legally becoming a church.
Yeah, they went through the process with the Texas authorities. But yeah, they don't have a specific exemption. But yeah, I mean, they want to get the medicine to the people right now. They're not waiting for the FDA. And obviously, while that's an important thing as well, like to have a whole ecosystem where you've got like the Church of Silomethoxin, you've got Dave Hodges' Church of Ambrosia, and you've got Soul Quest, who recently I think got turned down actually for an exemption on some sort of technicality.
Yes,
so
they did.
There's a kind of rich tapestry of folks in this space, but yeah, I think that the church felt kind of unfairly maligned, by folks on Twitter and elsewhere. But maybe they were like acting a bit fast and loose, sending this out before they exactly knew what it was scientifically. But, they're experienced psychonauts. They tried it, on themselves, numerous times and their friends. And like, maybe that's not like proper and correct, but that's, the way that they figured out. And that they are, I genuinely think, kind of trying to help people. But they could be. They seems like they're quite content with potentially making quite a lot of money in the process. But most other people, many other people in the space seem to feel the same. So is it so bad? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's always an interesting question, right? Is profiting, especially when you're profiting significantly from psychedelic services, sort of, I don't know, does that sort of like tamper with the purity of the intention, the desire to heal? We had a really interesting conference this past weekend, Double Blind hosted, on working in psychedelics. And it's basically ethical considerations around, getting involved in the psychedelic movement professionally. And this question of, how much should psychedelic facilitators charge? What's ethical to charge for a psychedelic retreat or underground therapy session came up. And I thought that the facilitators made a really interesting point, which is that, even in traditional contexts going back many generations, the curanderos, the curanderas, the healers, they were not doing this for free, right? Like, commerce, energetic exchange, it's always been a thing. So people, especially in this current reality that we're living in, and this is not my opinion, this is what was shared in the conference, but, people, of course, at the risk of stating the obvious, they have to pay for their rent. They have to pay for their kids to go to school and for their groceries. So if someone is spending, 8, 10, 12 hours with someone, I mean, there's a case to be made that they deserve to be compensated for that. And it doesn't make them a bad person for wanting to be compensated for that. But yeah, the case with the silomethoxin and sending it all around the world, I mean, that's Yeah, that gets really tricky. Anyway, I think that this is a good time to pivot to our next story, which is going to be about all of the shroom dispensaries that are popping up, because you sort of made a reference to, the folks at the Church of Silomethoxin, but also folks at other, quote, religious organizations and churches that are selling psychedelics, really doing this to kind of blaze a trail. A lot of them think that this is the way that reform is going to get pushed forward, not by twiddling our thumbs and waiting for the FDA to give psychedelics their stamp of approval. So now I'd like to talk to you about a rising trend that has been woven through several of the stories that you've reported for us, which is this idea of the shroom dispensary. Okay, so I remember one of the first stories that we ever published at Double Blind back in 2019. Like, we just put the website live. We had like 6 or 7 stories that were good to go. And one of them was about the rise of shroom dispensaries in Canada. And that this story went viral on Reddit. It hit the first page of Reddit. Our server almost crashed. It was very exciting and also stressful for the Double Blind team. And what it indicated to us, which I guess in retrospect shouldn't have been a big surprise, is that people are really excited about the idea of shroom dispensaries. But people are, I don't want to say people generally, some people are kind of jumping the gun on this one, at least if they are wanting to do things sort of at a pace that represents the pace of reform, right? Like, there actually hasn't been, yes, there's a growing number of jurisdictions in the United States, I want to say about a dozen at this point, and in Canada, that have made the growing gifting and possession of psilocybin mushrooms a low law enforcement priority. No, that does not mean that you can sell mushroom gummies on Instagram, and no, that does not mean you can open a shroom dispensary. But some people are doing it anyway. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I'm living in Vancouver now, actually, and there's about a dozen mushroom dispensaries around the city. And yeah, I understand that before the legalization of cannabis, it was a kind of similar situation where these sort of grey market dispensaries sprung up and were largely left to their own devices by the authorities. The most well-known one here in Vancouver is called the Coca Leaf Cafe and Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary. And yeah, I visited there and wrote a story for Vice recently. And yeah, they don't just have mushrooms. They're selling LSD, DMT, peyotes, coca, all manner of like mind-altering substances and plants. The guy got raided in November, and he thinks that it's because he basically like appeared in some kind of video in front of some coca leaves and was talking about cocaine legalization. And yeah, he reckons that he just kind of overstepped the mark.
That is just careless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So also something else I want to say about this on the note of videos and social media content around illegal activity is even in Denver, which was the first city to make the possession of psilocybin mushrooms a low law enforcement priority in the United States, someone was busted by the feds. And why was he busted? Because he was growing huge amounts of psilocybin mushrooms and he was posting about it on the internet. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's just so absurd. Yes, it's true that, governments, including in the United States and Canada, have bigger fish to fry than Joe Schmo growing psilocybin mushrooms in a tub in his closet. But if you are doing something on such a large scale and you're being blatant about it and you're posting about it on social media, like, come on.
Yeah, these guys have put flyers up around town as well. In the neighborhood where I live, they've literally put like signs like saying, come to our store and buy Kratom is the most recent one I saw. But, they're basically fulfilling two functions, right? On one side, they are this kind of like battering ram of entrepreneurial activism, like drug law activism, and kind of imagining a new world, and showing, you know, that it is easily within our reach. And second point is that, yeah, they're providing actually a more legit and safer alternative from people buying, you know, magic mushroom gummies from Tom, Dick, and Harry on Instagram that might not actually include what you think it does. And yeah, to be fair to this chap at the Coca Leaf Cafe, he's clearly shifting a lot of weight, but he's putting money into like a drug testing scheme because of the issues with hard drug use in Vancouver and fentanyl. And he says he's put in about $1.5 million Canadian and done about 65,000 tests of various substances in the process. And he put out
people just bring substances to the shop and he tests them independently for free?
It's a separate location, but yeah.
I see. Wow. I mean, that's a huge public service. Also at the conference that we did this past weekend, we did a panel on drug reform and just sort of dismantling the drug war more broadly. And one of the people in our community asked these brilliant panelists, you know, in an imaginary world where tomorrow your drugs are, what do you do? And they all agreed that one of the top priorities would be making drug testing more available, especially when we're talking about substances like psilocybin. You know, people assume that psilocybin can't be adulterated. And it's true because it, you know, grows from the earth. It's true that, you know, at least so far, we haven't seen psilocybin products have fentanyl in them, God forbid, or anything that, you know, can really kill someone. But I mean, certainly there's people cutting corners, putting muscimol extract, Amanita muscaria extract, 4-ACO-DMT, all kinds of things that are not psilocybin. And really, if you get a psilocybin product, there's no way to test it. I mean, there's a couple drug testing kits. I don't know how accessible they are. I don't know how much they cost, but they're not ubiquitous and they're not easy to find.
I would say the onus is really on the state, actually, to prove it's worth its salt. And given the fact that psychedelic use is growing so much, and indeed other drug use and drug misuse, and we need to look at the evidence here. And testing saves lives, and providing, you know, free diamorphine, like medical grade heroin, saves people who use drugs' lives, because they're not getting messed up with fentanyl or getting in scraps with dealers, or just, you know, having to go around like committing crimes to you know, keep their body going, because they have a physical dependence. So yeah, I hope that as part of this kind of wider psychedelic and, you know, consciousness awakening that seems to be kind of happening bit by bit, that we're going to have a far more enlightened drug policy across the board.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute when we get into your book. But you also, in addition to writing about some of the shroom dispensaries that are popping up in Canada, of which it seems that there are many more than in the United States, and the ones in Canada seem to actually be selling psilocybin, whereas the ones in the US, well, we're not so sure. But you also reported on a couple of quote unquote dispensaries or brick and mortars that claimed they were selling shroom products in the United States. And the most blatant case was a place called Shroom House, which opened and quickly got shut down in Portland, Oregon last year. The store opened in October and was allegedly selling many different types of psilocybin products. So it's the same kind of deal as with the Coca Leaf Cafe, where they're posting flyers around town saying, come get kratom. People were lining up around the block. There was a billboard across the street with mushrooms on it, and a sign out front too with mushrooms on it. So not exactly subtle. And it was around for about 2 months before it was shut down. The owner's bail was set at $1.5 million. The owner was subsequently charged, along with the manager of the store, on 22 counts, mostly money laundering and manufacturing and delivery of a controlled substance near a school, but also one count of unlawful possession of a Schedule I drug. And, you know, there's also been a couple other places. There was a dispensary, quote unquote, that was in Florida that you wrote about for us. The Double Blind team has been keeping eyes on a dispensary, quote unquote, that seems to have opened in Venice, California recently. So tell us more about, you know, some of these places that you reported on in the United States.
Well, I think the headline for the place that was selling the Amanita products in Tampa Bay, Florida was like, now the US has a magic mushroom dispensary. And yeah, the story had already gone viral in like other outlets. And yeah, I think he did really, really well out of it, Carlos. But then it transpired. We're not entirely sure of the exact specifics, but it seemed that some of his Amanita products weren't exactly what he thought they were. And he's a cannabis guy as well. So I don't think he'd necessarily had like, you know, experienced sort of psychonautical testing done on the products, you know, that he was buying from another wholesaler, I think somewhere in Eastern Europe. We do kind of need some kind of regulation, whether that's kind of like community regulation, as is what kind of happened when people just did tests and were like, oh, maybe this is actually just like a trace amount of psilocybin and he's right. Or it is like the FDA going around with a clipboard and testing everything for potency. I don't think that would necessarily be a bad idea, although it seems that the FDA gets most of its funding from the pharmaceutical companies. So it'd be an interesting situation if in 100 years' time, the FDA is getting most of its funding from psychedelic companies and is then allowing them to cut corners.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, I want to say, poses a true harm to sort of this forthcoming psychedelic, I don't want to say it's forthcoming, it's arrived, this burgeoning psychedelic movement to have people selling over-the-counter products without the proper education. I mean, you hear these horror stories of people on Reddit, like, I went into this shop, I bought a chocolate bar, it said a third of the chocolate bar was going to be a medium dose. Next thing I knew, you know, the walls were melting. I was freaking out. If you're taking mucimol, for example, it's not going to be anything like, which is the extract from the Amanita muscaria. It's not even going to be anything like psilocybin. So if you're expecting it to be psilocybin, you could end up with cold sweats. You could end up, you know, with something akin to paralysis. And then you're talking about, you know, you have people who really care and who want to make medicines available. And you also have people like, you know, I don't want to make assumptions about this guy in Florida, but people who really don't understand. Like, they just kind of want to push the market forward and they see a money-making opportunity, but they don't understand cannabis is not, mucimol is not psilocybin. They're all very different substances.
And I don't think the psychedelic grey market industry, let's say, has really arrived at where cannabis did, where everything's kind of potency tested. A lot of the stuff is just sold by weight, and you can have like two mushrooms in the same bag that are like double the strength as each other. Some mushrooms are 40 times stronger than other mushrooms, like in terms of strains. So we're just not there yet, where like even in these dispensaries that they're putting, like when you buy cannabis, it's like 2% THC or something. We're just not there yet. But I think that's coming along. Not least thanks to Dave Hodges and his pioneering potency testing efforts.
And for those of you who don't know who Dave Hodges is, he started a what would we call it? A psychedelic church in Oakland called Zydor.
I think they call it a non-denominational interfaith religion.
Yeah, he's a wild guy. I recommend you Google him and take a look at his outfits and his hats.
Yeah, they're doing really interesting stuff. The The only thing to add really is apparently they only started doing the potency testing when they accidentally overdosed someone. I mean, she'd bought her own mushrooms and she'd already been doing the kind of high dose work with them at their God Sitters Project house in the Oakland Hills. But apparently they realized subsequently that her mushrooms are 3 times stronger than they'd thought. So she wanted to take 15 grams, but then eventually, she effectively took 45 grams and just wasn't ready for the intensity of that experience. So now,
I mean, even 15 grams is insane. I once accidentally took more than 10 grams because my scale was broken.
Oh, wow.
I won't tell you the end of that story today. So
maybe that deserves its own podcast.
Yeah, let's just say I was rolling around on my kitchen floor for about 6 hours, completely disassociated. So on this tip of testing and reducing harm, I know that this was sort of at the heart of the book that you wrote, Should All Drugs Be Legalized? And why don't you tell us a little bit about, you could write a book about so many things. You've walked so many paths. You've met so many interesting people. So why did you land on this particular topic?
I was actually approached because of my reporting at that point for The Guardian, where I was writing a lot about medical cannabis legalization in the UK. But it's obviously, a topic really, really close to my heart, like not least because of addiction in my family and having family members who are addicted to heroin and just the way they were treated, I guess, by the state, whether that was through having to go to jail or having like their driving license revoked. And it just seems to me that that's just a totally wrong-headed approach. They're just going to force people further into the depths of addiction. So I've always had a skepticism about the kind of mainstream policies for it. But through all of this, I guess I've just seen what the possible solutions can be, whether that's like visiting an overdose prevention center in Denmark, like a safe place for people to inject and smoke crack with clean materials and to access kind of wider support services in the process, or just the healing potential of psychedelics and the frankly crazy reality that they're still largely prohibited around the world. So basically the book traverses like the history of drug use and clearly shows humans have just got this deep rooted need or impulse to change consciousness for various means, whether that's through drinking tea or coffee or taking a boga as part of a coming of age ritual. And then we get into like the contradictions of the war on drugs, and then the future reality that is coming around the corner. I remember I quoted Steve Rolls from Transform Drug Policy Foundation in the book, and he was sort of conjuring this like alternative reality where you'd have club nights where there'd be no alcohol and there'd be like kind of massages or different kinds of experiences to make up the shortfall from them not selling alcohol. And then I saw that you guys did like a shroom, did like a shroom rave with Michelle LeHoucq, and since then I've been to similar such events here in Vancouver and elsewhere. So prophetic words, thanks to Steve.
The question of the hour is, should all drugs be legalized?
Honestly, I think I'm not sure like we should have crack and methamphetamine in high street dispensaries. Obviously not. And some drugs should be, in my view, subject to greater controls than others. Maybe some you need a prescription and like a doctor consultation first. Others, maybe it's just a sort of quick harm reduction consultation like you might have in like an Amsterdam head shop at the moment. Or then maybe some are just in a purely kind of retail model where there's maybe allowed some degree of advertising and not the same kind of harm reduction consultation when you get it, perhaps with certain things. But I think even with cannabis, if people smoke a lot, they can get into a pretty intense kind of situation. But yeah, if we do legally regulate drugs like heroin and cocaine, then the demand, I think, for many other drugs like crack, whose sale is kind of inextricably intertwined with the illegal market, I think will kind of disappear overnight. People want the good stuff, and it's the illegal market which is kind of diluting everything down and contaminating stuff. And yeah, it just comes down to kind of moral question, really. Like, should someone have the right to inject heroin and enjoy the experience? I certainly never have, but I would support someone's right to do that. And I don't think it's so bad, especially when you've got people drinking 2 liters of vodka a night that's kind of on sale up and down the high street.
And for those of you who are wondering, why are we talking about broader drug policy reform and the drug war on a podcast about psychedelics, where we should be talking about DMT entities and a shifting of consciousness? I'm being a little humorous, but talk to us for a moment about this concept of psychedelic exceptionalism and why people who are using psychedelics should care about other drug users.
Yeah, I mean, I was having an interesting conversation yesterday, and I was kind of, talking about how folks, maybe need to stand up a little bit more, including myself, perhaps, in sort of wanting wider kind of political changes in as well, but I just don't think it's very realistic right now, and we need to kind of meet people where they're at. And in much the same vein, I do feel that in the wider kind of psychedelic space, there is a kind of like insularness, when actually, as I hope my book shows, it's all intertwined. And we can't have this kind of psychedelic healing utopia if folks aren't getting like access to free heroin. And yeah, there's a real moral injury, I think. Yeah, there's such a moral injury for everyone. Like walking down the street of Vancouver, like in downtown, everyone suffers from seeing folks in like strung out in the states that they are. So yeah, it's kind of amazing. I read that California is putting $6 billion into sorting out San Francisco's homelessness problem because they've figured out, I suppose, that actually it's really, really bad for us, like our mental and like spiritual and emotional health to see people strung out like this. And yeah, we need to do something about it, not just for that reason, like, of course, but simply to help people and just have empathy.
So we'll talk about this more in later podcasts, but for folks who don't know, psychedelic exceptionalism is a term that was largely popularized by Dr. Carl Hart, who's a neuroscientist at Columbia, who also wrote a book. I think it's called Grown-Ups Use Drugs or Drugs Use, I don't know, something along those lines. The point is, sort of the premise of the book being that we shouldn't demonize certain kinds of drug users, and we shouldn't create a false dichotomy whereby we say, these are good drugs, these are bad drugs. The people that use the good drugs are good people. The people that use the bad drugs are bad people. And I think that, one of the things we're really committed to talking about on this podcast is not just about how psychedelics are so wonderful and everyone should take them and they're going to save the world, but, sort of the underbelly of the psychedelic industry, and also sort of complexifying this narrative that psychedelics are the answer. Psychedelics are the panacea, because we see, I'm sure you've seen, Mattha, at Burning Man, at festivals, people abuse psychedelics. People take too many. People take them in contexts where they're not properly supported. They become even more traumatized than they were before they took the psychedelic in the first place. On the flip side, you have Dr. Carl Hart saying in his book, I've actually been using heroin for many years. And guess what? I'm a functional person that is a professor at Columbia University at an Ivy League school. And so, generally speaking, we really want to zoom back and think critically about like, what are the assumptions we're making about these drugs? And to be really honest with ourselves, especially once we start advocating for reform. We saw what happened in cannabis, that there was so much emphasis on, sort of the medical and therapeutic potential of cannabis that, we're really not talking about the fact that, guess what? People also get way too high on cannabis. People also become dependent on it. And, it's just not that simple. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah. As we're seeing in Oregon now with the rolling back of the kind of wider decrim measures. But I mean, where are the people that were supporting magic mushroom reforms that are really, really standing up and saying this isn't right? I'm not sure. I mean, I've read some coverage. It seems to me that the psychedelic community should really be up in arms, about this fact, because it's going to be the people, on the wrong end, the people using drugs on the streets that are at risk of being, thrown back into jail for, servicing their need for drugs, which as a result of maybe even societal like trauma. So yeah, it's all interconnected, and I think to kind of silo it off, is pretty naive and maybe even short-sighted.
Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, well, most people who are passionate about psychedelics have probably heard at this point that Oregon legalized psilocybin sessions. It's not really psilocybin therapy. A lot of, headlines kind of get that wrong, because you don't have to be a therapist in order to administer psilocybin in a supported session. According to the bill, they're making it so all kinds of people can facilitate, although they do have to be licensed by the state. But a lot of people have heard this news, but this was Measure 109, but what they maybe didn't hear is that at the same time, Oregon decriminalized all drugs, sort of following in the footsteps of Portugal. And that now that measure is being rolled back. And, there's a lot of issues with that, some of which we've touched on, but one of them being, if anybody saw how much it costs to do psilocybin legally in Oregon, it's like thousands of dollars. There's not very many facilities that have been approved by the state. They all have ridiculously long wait lists. So this bill, at this point, it's not really helping very many people, like all the people in the state who want to do drugs on their own, whether it's a psychedelic or some other kind of drug.
Yeah. There's so much red tape that these clinics have to grapple with, to be fair. And I think that is what has led to the high price tags. I saw that there was a report that the first one in Oregon has closed, actually, because they said that the numbers just weren't where they thought they would be. But I've heard of others having like super long wait lists. I know that, there's some like community options which are much cheaper, although I don't know exactly how they're, getting by. But yeah, I guess it's just part of like the American system, really, that it has to be like shoehorned into a for-profit model. I know that the state did invest quite a lot of money into kind of wider harm reduction measures for the people using like heroin and other drugs, but they just didn't go far enough. They need, like drug consumption spaces, like here in Vancouver, and there wasn't the political appetite to go that far. So those people on the streets taking drugs, and it coincided with the arrival of fentanyl. And people have kind of attributed the measure to having caused the seeming increase in street drug use, when actually it's probably down to a number of other factors. And the politicians sadly have just bottled it. Imagine like an alternative reality where the psilocybin centers are state run at reasonable prices, and the red tape is reduced, and any surplus from the profits goes towards wider harm reduction measures for the people addicted to heroin.
I really appreciate that you brought up this concept of red tape, because when I think about this concept of should all drugs be legalized, if I don't think about it too deeply, my first reaction is, yeah, why not? When I start thinking about it a little more, I'm like, every time the government gets involved in the United States, like, have you been to the DMV in the United States? Like, do we really want the people who run the DMV regulating drugs? We saw what happened in California, right? Where there was so much bureaucracy, so much, you got to have child-proof packaging, and you got to have, it's like, it really just made it impossible for people without huge amounts of capital to compete. And then the prices went up so high, and now people are buying weed on the traditional quote unquote market again. So, when you think about this concept of should all drugs be legalized, I mean, are you concerned about the impact that might have on accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, in the US, it's clearly, especially in certain states, been a just total corporate takeover and, collaboration between the state and certain business interests that has led to the current moment. But there's, more ethical models that are being trialed or been rolled out in the rest of the world. I mean, in Malta and Uruguay, they have, non-commercial models where there's like cannabis social clubs where the members grow the weed. And it's also, I think, available through prescriptions, but there's not this commercial model. And that seems to be the model that Germany have opted for, at least at this point. So, I mean, I think if business interests get hold of all of these psychedelics and work with politicians to sideline smaller operators, and then just turn it into a big thing of like economies of scale and profit, and just such high barriers to entry in terms of red tape and bureaucracy, then we're all destined for a pretty bad trip. And that's why I think actually the psychedelic church movement and other similar such things and cannabis social clubs, really rooting this whole thing in a far greater and less profit motivated ethos. And we'll be guided by them, I suppose. If that did kind of happen in the US, where there was like a corporate capture of the bufo toad market. But it's all this stuff is really, really important to consider. But I don't think, just like in Oregon with them just rolling back quite a progressive reform, I don't think it's an argument to just stop doing something or not reforming. It's actually, well, what is the best and most ethical and most community-centric model, and supporting folks that are moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, Oregon is going first, and one of the benefits of the state-by-state reform model, at least, is that the states that follow, and this is a big if, but if they want to prioritize things like equity access and community-centered models, can learn. Colorado is closely behind Oregon. Just felt like saying that. Trip tips. First, as always, we have to provide a disclaimer, which is that Mattha and I are not doctors. We're also not psychiatrists. We're also not shamans. We are journalists who have also done a lot of psychedelics. With that said, Mattha, why don't you kick it off with our first question from the double-blind community?
This is, I really want to do psychedelics in an environment where I feel safe and supported. I'm not exactly sure where to go. I've been reading about different retreats online. What would you recommend? Do I answer that? Or?
You can answer it, and I'll also answer it.
Patience and discernment.
Yes, patience and discernment. And we can also put the double-blind guide to vetting your psychedelic facilitator in the show notes, along with all the stories that we referenced today. But I think one of the first questions you want to ask yourself when you want to have a psychedelic experience, at the risk of stating the obvious, is, why do I want to have this experience? And what am I looking to get out of it? Because that is going to help inform the type of setting that you feel you need for your trip to unfold. If you're a person that has a family or personal history of psychosis, bipolar, schizophrenia, trauma, and you're wanting to do a psychedelic to heal those things or to look at those things, then you're going to want a very different setting, probably, than someone who just wants to try mushrooms to explore their consciousness or to reconnect with their partner, or a variety of other reasons that are not centered around some kind of psychiatric condition that could potentially actually be made worse by a psychedelic if you're sitting with the wrong person, if you're sitting in the wrong setting, if you do too much. So that would kind of be the first place that I would recommend folks start. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I just want to say there are so many retreat centers and clinics that are just all of a sudden popping up out of nowhere. And some of them, Mattha has done some reporting on this and is doing some more reporting on this, but I won't say more for now because the story isn't out yet, might look really professional. They might have a lot of money. They might have a marketing team that is putting together a website that talks about how the retreat center is so beautiful and all these people have come and they've had life-changing experiences. And, just because someone has a good website that looks really nice doesn't mean that they actually are working in integrity. So I don't know if, Mattha, you want to say more about that without revealing the forthcoming story.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, if possible, to meet the folks that are offering this beforehand, because you can tell so much just from the vibe you get from someone or their energy or their intentions just from that like face-to-face meeting. And yeah, I would say like maybe try to keep it as local as possible, not least for the cost, but just the whole like rigmarole of like, going far or, traveling or taking a flight. And yeah, get like more than one recommendation, and yeah, maybe even ask to speak to people that they've served before. But I think, just crucial, get to know them maybe a little bit before, or visit their space and just like do a little vibe check. Because I think a lot of people just go into it without having done that. I certainly have. And I think just to spend like 5 minutes with someone, you can see if it's going to be like a right fit. And just like I said before with the patience thing, I know in some cases, like when folks have got like PTSD or certain addictions, maybe the case is like a lot more like urgent perhaps. But yeah, in the vast majority of cases, I would say, just don't rush into it, and just know that the benefits can be so immense. But also, if you have a less than ideal experience, you might be grappling with that for a while as well. So yeah, just waiting and finding the perfect kind of situation really is advisable.
You can think of it as sort of like metaphysical or spiritual surgery. So, I mean, would you go to a doctor that wasn't willing to meet you ahead of time and talk to you about your medical history? Probably not. That's what I would say about that. And there's a lot more to be said. But Double Blind does have a lot of resources. And as mentioned, we will put that guide to vetting your facilitator in the show notes. So question number 2, my life has been changed by psychedelics and I want to help others walk the same path. How can I do that? How much does it cost? How long does it take? Okay. We have so many people in the double blind community who want to hold space for others. And if you're someone that has had a transformative psychedelic experience or maybe multiple transformative psychedelic experiences, and now you're saying, I want to help other people. Well, firstly, that is beautiful. It's really, really beautiful revelation to have. And also, I would say, slow down. It requires a lot, like many, many years, typically, whether you're going kind of the traditional therapy route or you're training in the jungle to get to a point where people that really do this work are going to sort of give you the go ahead to hold space for other people. And so there are many, many different routes. There are a lot of schools where people can go and get trained to hold space for others. Some of them are going to require that you are already a therapist, and then you're going on to get an additional training to become a psychedelic therapist. Some of the programs that we like are Fluence. We like Vitals, which is a program that Psychedelics Today put out. I don't think you have to be a therapist already to go through that one. And then there's also, walking the sort of more traditional path with Indigenous communities. There are some retreat centers and things where you can go and do what are called dietas, which are basically long periods of time in isolation in nature, usually in the jungle, with elders who help you learn and cultivate a relationship with these plants. But sort of same thing like we were talking about before, when you're going to another country and you're going to give yourself over to somebody basically to learn from them. You have to be really careful about who you choose, really mindful of that. So I think that's all I'll say for now. I will say, I guess the last thing I'll say is it is expensive, kind of no matter which path you take. It does require usually several thousands of dollars, whether you're going to a training program or you're going to the jungle. And it also just takes a lot of dedication. And the number one thing I hear over and over again from facilitators, whether they're doing underground ayahuasca ceremonies, they're an underground therapist holding space with psilocybin and MDMA, or they're, doing research as a part of these clinical trials, is the biggest piece here is self-inquiry and really being honest with yourself about how far along you are in your own journey. Because it can get really, it can be really hard to sort of keep yourself contained in a situation where someone is really sort of in another dimension and needs your support, needs you to stand there like a pillar and be with them through that. So just because you've had a life-changing experience doesn't mean that you're ready to help other people have life-changing experiences too. It doesn't mean you're not, but you just have to really slow down and be honest with yourself about where you're at on your path. Mattha, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, only to echo what you would say, really. I mean, I'm all about democratizing transcendence and all of that. But yeah, I can see.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I can see folks are just rushing into it and are actually beginning to offer psychedelics without even doing any of these kind of requisite trainings that you speak of. And yeah, I think, a lot of the time maybe things will go fine, but it's in that like 10-20% of cases perhaps where people can have like a difficult reaction or challenging experience is where you're really going to find out, whether you're worth your salts and whether you can like cut the mustard and like help this person. And if you haven't like done a proper apprenticeship, then you're going to get found out. And yeah, if you don't have that level of self-inquiry and you're kind of rushing it, whether for like egoic reasons or more pure intentions of just wanting to kind of help people or but look, there's enough people out there now. Certainly we're in need of a lot more people that are experienced psychedelic medicine facilitators. But yeah, just do the work, do the training, do the self-inquiry, and yeah, then you'll be ready. Like there's no rush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you to folks who are submitting their questions. If you want the chance to have your tripping questions answered on this podcast, then you can email them to us at magichour@doubleblindmag.com. Either way, we would love to hear from you there. So before we wrap up, Mattha, we usually invite our guests to drop in with us for a couple of moments of breath work, meditation, just to sort of digest the conversation. We hope that our listeners will join us in that too. Are you up for it?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to having the space and time to integrate this experience now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sky Weaver, resident facilitator at Double Blind. Thank you for being here today. So I welcome you to just be in your space here, perhaps rolling your shoulders back. Nice. And shrugging your shoulders up to your ears. Deep breath in, and on your exhale, drop those shoulders down. Good. You can even wiggle a little bit, right? Meditation doesn't have to be still. Just a single pointed focus. And allowing your right ear to drop to your right shoulder while keeping your left shoulder down. Deep breath to stretch that left side of the neck. That's it. A couple breaths here. Maybe softening the lips and the jaw. And the face, scowly foreheads. Your next inhale, lifting that head up to neutral and bringing the left ear to the left shoulder, stretching the right shoulder blade down. Couple breaths here. Feel free to make sound if that feels good to you. That's it. Next inhale, coming all the way up. And taking a moment to take that chin down to your heart. Keeping those shoulder blades down to stretch the whole neck and upper back. Deep breath here. And on your next inhale, rolling that neck up. Wiggle those shoulders. Welcome back to your body, friends. Good to be here with you today.
When you're ready, I invite you to open up your eyes. Do a little stretch if you're not driving. Or if you are, just stretch with one arm, then the other. Mattha, thanks again for joining. And in addition to letting folks know where they can find you and your work, I want to ask if there's anything else that is alive for you right now that you'd like to share regarding your reporting and just your sort of thoughts about the psychedelic ecosystem more broadly. And I know that that's a big question because there's so many things we didn't touch on today, but anything else you'd like to share for now?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Mattha, Mattha, Mundo, Mundo. And I'm still on Twitter. So folks can connect with me and check out what I'm sharing there. And just grateful for you having me on the podcast, and kind of blissed out actually after that little drop in.
Well, thanks again for just being you, because it's only because of your dedication to the intrepid traveler path that you have found so many amazing people and places and stories and brought them to Double Blind. Again, we're going to put the links to all of these stories in the show notes if you want to check out Mattha's writing, and he'll be reporting more for us in the future. And I think that's all for now. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Shelby. Good luck with the podcast and with everything.
Thank you. Folks, if you want the chance for us to answer your questions on air about tripping, I want to remind you that you can send them to magichour@doubleblindmag.com. Either way, we do our best to answer people's questions on Instagram, via DMs, and we also now have a fancy AI chatbot on our site that we've trained with all of our articles to answer your questions about tripping. And we also have classes on how to grow mushrooms and how to microdose. So there's a lot of ways that we support people, and you can find all of that at doubleblindmag.com. If you have thoughts about what we talked about today, you have suggestions about who should come on, we also invite you to hit us up at magichour@doubleblindmag.com or visit us on any of the social media channels, really. We're on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, at doubleblindmag. I also want to give a shout out to the amazing folks at Human Content who are producing this podcast and helping make it possible. They do a lot of great podcasts other than this one, so if you're an audiophile, check them out on Instagram and TikTok at Human Content Pods. Thanks to all of our great listeners for leaving wonderful feedback and awesome reviews. If you subscribe and comment on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube, we might give you a shout out. You can watch full video episodes of this podcast up every week on YouTube at Double Blind. I'm your host, Shelby Hartman. Special thanks again to our correspondent, Mattha Busby. Our executive producers are Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, Shanti Brooke, and Alex Field from the Double Blind team, who also edits the show. Our engineer is Jason Portizo. Our music is by Oma. To learn about the Double Blind Magic Hour program disclaimer and ethics policy and submission verification and licensing terms, you can go to doubleblindmag.com/magichour or reach out to us at magichour@doubleblindmag.com with any questions, concerns, or inspirational quotes. The Double Blind Magic Hour is a Human Content and Double Blind production. Now we're going to take you out on a song that is near and dear to my heart. It's one you'll hear a lot in the medicine music world. It's called Sirenita Bobinsana by Arturo Mena, and this is a beautiful rendition by Shimshai and Susanna. Enjoy, and until next time.
Sirenita de los ríos, danza, danza con el viento. Sirenita de los ríos, danza, danza con el viento. Con tus flores y aromas perfumas los corazones. Con tus flores y aromas perfumas los corazones. Cura, cura, cuerpecitos, limpia, limpia, espirititos. Cura, cura, cuerpecitos, limpia, limpia, espirititos.
Thanks for watching. And if you're thinking, gosh, I really need more Double Blind Magic Hour in my life, well, you can start listening now by clicking on that playlist button right over there. New episodes are out every Monday, so please subscribe and join us each week on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.